My name is Nkgopotse. I am an associate professor in the School of Public Management and Administration. You are all welcome. I just have a quick announcement. Well, with regards to, the bathroom. So when you exit the door, to your left, the first door is the ladies, the second door is the gentlemen. In case of an unfortunate incident where we would be required to vacate this premises, well, the building, our assembly point is just across on the open space out there. So just in the case of an incident. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
I had I need to say this to Ivo because I know he doesn't want me to call what I'm going to call him. But I heard the secretary of the ANC on TV referring to himself proudly as a boss. I'm the boss here. That's what he was saying on TV. So I'm just going to say, as per the instruction of my boss, Ivo, he does not like to be called a boss. But it's on a lighter note, Ivo. So my name is Yoli Swa. Those who know me call me Yoli Makasi. And I'm going to be walking this journey with you today. And I'm too excited about the program for today because this is the stuff I want to do in my life, to engage with this type of content. I am a public servant at heart. I see there's a former colleague of mine there from DPSA entering. So I have worked in government all my life. Is it not on? Okay. I have worked in government all my life and almost 30 years working in the public service sector, rather, more mainstream in the public service with a few entities I've worked for before. And that journey culminated in me being a Director General at DPSA for 5 years, 2020 to 2025. And then they got tired of me, they got rid of me, and when my contract ended. So I worked for the New South Institute for almost a year. They didn't get tired of me, but I was stolen elsewhere. I was stolen somewhere. So I now work in Parliament as an executive director for, I want to say this properly, legislative sector support. So it's like the work I've done at DPSA and in government of creating norms and standards. I'm actually hiding from my supervisor right now. So just in terms of the activities of the program for today, a little bit of welcoming for me would really just to say that I think I was asking Prof if there is students who are here, and she did say there are. And I do want to say that to the students who are here, don't play with such opportunities. You have practitioners, you have academics, and you have yourselves in the same space. You have people who have written books like Ivo. And I'm sure he's not the only one. I'm just making an example about him. When I was a student of public management years ago in the 90s, I used to read about people that when I meet them, some of them now, I'm like so excited. It's like I'm seeing a celebrity. Because I was in PE, I was like a rural girl in PE. I never thought I would even meet these people. I never even thought I would come to Pretoria and do any work in Pretoria. So use this opportunity, find their books and read, because the most important thing with such books is that they also bring in the experience, because they've lived certain things that they are writing about and talking about. So that's very important. Don't miss that opportunity. Also, you will learn when you engage in this type of engagements that, for me, it's especially the practitioners that come into the space, is that when you talk about reforms, it's a very interesting subject in government, because we want it in word, but we don't want to implement. We don't like changing things in government. Maybe it's just how people are. So we speak about it in platforms. I don't know how many times in my life as a public servant and in senior management, I've heard a leader saying, no, zero tolerance to corruption, to this and this. And then when we get in the office, HOD or DG, come here. I want 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And they're thinking, how did we get there? Because I was just listening to you addressing a few minutes ago, and you were completely against irregularity and not following process in doing things, and which may lead, sometimes contribute to corruption. So the world of work is not necessarily what we portray all the time in the public sector. And I think generally, and you're not going to learn the world of work in classroom. You're going to learn it by being there, and you're going to learn it, you're going to pick up some things from us who have been there. But what is important is how, in the reform language, is how you navigate. When you are there in the system, you work hard, you pray to get a job in government, you're a public management student, you want to go and work in government, you arrive in government, you get in as an officer at a lower level, you have all these ideas of changing the world. You are not going to change the world there immediately. You're going to get frustrated, and then you'll start being less assertive. And so it's important that you find you are able to navigate that space. So don't take such gatherings for granted, like this one today, and identify people that you also want to follow up and talk to going forward. So we're here today because of public service reforms. And the conversation is we're focusing on public service reforms in practice. And this is very important. We have a legislation that was approved by the president, was assented to by the president on the 1st of April. The Public Service Amendment Act, as well, 2 pieces actually of legislation, as well as the Public Administration and Management Act. I know them very well because I've worked on them. We've pushed them. I've worked on them when I was in government. I've been lucky to work on them when I was outside government at New South Institute. I represented the New South Institute in all the provincial engagements that the NCOP had on consultations. And now I work in Parliament, so when I talk about the effectiveness of their public participation in Parliament, I am able to share with them because I've engaged with that process in particular. So there's lots of experiences there for public administration students in particular. So listen to them, they are very knowledgeable on these issues. Our panel, we have, in terms of the program, we have presentations from Ivo, who is a co-founder and director of NSI. He has also co-authored of Retiring the 1994 Generation of Public Servants, Reflections on the Senior Management Service in South Africa's Third Transition in Public Service Reforms. We have Professor Albert Walk, who's with the Gordon Institute of Business, and he has written on talent management in the South African public service, evidence from the provincial departments of health. I've had an opportunity to make a contribution in both these papers, and I'm looking forward to see especially your final product in terms of this paper, Prof. And we also have Prof. Gerda, whom I'm sure everyone in this house knows. She is with the University of Pretoria. She's going to reflect on public leadership and institutional reform and capacity in the public service. And then we also have Professor Somadoda Fikeni, who's the chairperson of the Public Service Commission, who's going to reflect on the same topic. Then we open for all of us to engage and ask questions. So please keep your pens ready and your notebook ready to ask questions. I attended the Thabo Mbeki Foundation lecture in Cape Town, and I saw something very interesting. So there was the lecture was done, and then the patron TM went on stage together with one professor from, I think, LSE, I can't remember though, so let me not mess it up. So they were supposed to be in a conversation, and then President Thabo Mbeki just said, well, instead of being in a conversation with me, I want to hear from them, the people who are here, how are we going to fix South Africa? And then a few people raised their hands and they speak. The president's like, no, you are not getting there. So you're gonna have an opportunity to engage, but I think it's also important in your engagements that you also share ideas on how you think we can really improve our practice in terms of implementing public sector reform initiatives in South Africa. And I'm sure the speakers are going to take you through some of the content that is necessary. I rely on Ivo to trace it from, I don't know when the reform started. He has a way of sharing the stories around reforms, so I'm not going to take time and share on that. But I'm not putting you under pressure, Ivo, because you've already prepared, I guess, your presentation. But on that note, I'm going to perhaps welcome as well those who are connected, because I heard that there's also an online. So those who are connected online, we welcome them. I was hoping to see some of the young people who are students here, master students here that we have hosted at DPSA during my time. I don't know if they've graduated or they are still here. But if they are still here, tell them that I'm disappointed I don't see them here. And I'm going to find them wherever they are. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to Ivo. Ivo, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Lisa, thank you very much, and I'm very pleased that you've called me boss, because now that you're no longer with the NSI formally on a day-to-day basis, I'm going to exercise that kind of authority which the title carries over you in Parliament. So Parliament. There's an NSI is coming soon. Thank you very much, and thank you all of you for attending. I've called my presentation South Africa's Third Transition because I think this is the context which I want to situate the presentation within, and I think it's very important that we realise that something historical or significant is in play currently, and it'll be interesting to see whether Gerda and whether Albert agree with that framing. And this is what I mean by it. Nothing too dramatic. 1994 is the moment of parliamentary democracy. South Africa becomes a formal parliamentary democracy. We have an election, first time in South African history. 1996, shortly after that, South Africa becomes a constitutional democracy. Constitution is passed in 1996, celebrated worldwide and in South Africa as a deeply and profoundly progressive document. There's been, especially since 2015 and the state capture period, a profound rejection of that framing, but nonetheless, in 1996 we become a constitutional democracy. What I want to suggest is that since the 1st of April 2026, the signing of the Public Service Amendment Act into law, South Africa has entered a third transition, and no less significant, and I want to emphasize that, no less significant than the transition of 1994 and the transition of 1996. And what I mean by that is that the passing of this Public Service Amendment Act begins, doesn't end, but begins our movement or transition towards a professional public service. And it lays the fundamental groundwork for that transition in South Africa. And this is where I want to spend a little bit of time, if I can see the next slide. Around thinking around what the Public Service Amendment Act does and what it doesn't do. I think most important is it instantiates in law, for the first time in South Africa, a separation between political office and administrative office. And I think this is a profound and fundamental distinction. For those of you that have been working in the field of public administration, you will know from the history of the scholar, the history of the discipline, that this distinction is at the heart of how we understand the separation or the distinction between politics and administration, and the emergence of administration per se as an academic field. But within government, what is absolutely key is that the emergence of public administration as a field within practice occurs through certain kinds of activities or events within departments themselves. And let me make myself better understood there. In South Africa, since 1994, the Public Service Act of 1994, we've had a situation of a blurring of political and administrative office. Public Service Act of 1994, we understand the context quite well. South Africa's democratic breakthrough. African National Congress comes to power, but because of agreements during the negotiated transition, there is an agreement that existing apartheid-era public servants will remain in their positions. So effectively, the ANC comes to power, and it is obliged to inherit an apartheid-era public service, which it does not trust. It does not trust to implement its policies. It believes that this administration, even if they are decent people, are incapable, by virtue of their skills and their experience, of implementing the ANC's new progressive policies, and in particular the Reconstruction and Development Program. So, incapable. Thabo Mbeki, when he comes into the presidency, he goes further. He's not only suspicious of them in terms of their skills, he thinks that the public service is a potential source of counter-revolution. So we have a government that comes to power in 1994, deeply, deeply suspicious of the existing public administration, and yet it's required to work with them. What I've argued is that it develops a workaround, and the workaround is essentially to conflate or to obscure the difference between political office and administrative office, and you see that in the Public Service Act of 1994, especially in Section 3. And what it does is it grants to politicians, the president himself or herself, cabinet ministers at national level, and provincial ministers, MECs, it gives them a whole range of administrative powers. So they are not just politicians in terms of setting policy and strategy, they are invested with a whole range of fundamental administrative powers, and in particular the key ones, control of HR, which means control of recruitment. So from 1994, within the public service, that's at national government and in provincial government, the recruitment of all public servants is directed or inflected through a profoundly political process, controlled by cabinet ministers at national level and provincial ministers at provincial level. An extraordinary process when you think about it, comparatively and internationally. The extraordinary events, for example, on the post-war period in the US, the implementation of the Pendleton Act of the 19th century, in Japan, in China, Nigeria today, where there's a profound movement to distinguish very separately, clearly, between administrative and political roles. In Nigeria, for example, the senior leadership of the public administration very carefully insulated from political interference and arising into senior positions through a Nigerian academy of training and academy appointed through the equivalent of their public service commission. In South Africa until 1997, that was the situation. Here, all public servants were appointed through the Public Service Commission as a statutory body independent of or separate from political office. But in 1994, we give that task of the HR to our politicians. More than that, we give operational decision-making to the politicians as well. So not just HR, but the very organization of departments, the decision around what service delivery model you're going to use, how you're going to structure your department, even mundane decisions like the technology you use in the department are ultimately vested with the politician. So we have an extraordinary politicization of the administration, and we can understand why. The ANC is very, very nervous of this apartheid public administration. It wants to fundamentally exercise political control over that administration, and it does it by giving the politicians powers in and through the Public Service Act of 1994. There's a review in 1998. It suggests that maybe this arrangement should be temporary. There's a proposal that these powers of politicians should only exist in an interim period, that the recommendations of the 1998 Presidential Review Commission are not implemented, and as a result we've had a situation over the last 30 years of extreme politicization of the administration. There's been lots of media discussion around cadre deployment, the policies of the ANC about deploying cadres. That's not the issue. The issue is the foundation of it is in our law, in the Public Service Act of 1994. Some of us have been working on this for a long time, arguing that this arrangement has been dysfunctional to South Africa. Myself and several colleagues published a piece of work that came out in actually Monday is 9 years ago, called The Betrayal of the Promise, the first major study of state capture. And what we argued was the ability of malicious and malevolent forces within South African political culture to capture key institutions, and including state-owned enterprises, was made possible by the provisions of the Public Service Act, especially giving the politicians the right to deploy or appoint the allies or cadres into key positions inside the state and within state-owned enterprises. So again, this conflation of political and administrative office. So we've been working on this reform for a while. Through the work of the DPSA, senior colleagues in DPSA, including Yoliswa and others, a momentum was developed within the public service itself for reform. South African public servants get a very, very bad rap. They're often blamed for all sorts of terrible dysfunction in departments when it's not necessarily their fault. There are many very talented, exceptional public servants working hard to do their jobs in administrations. They often get painted with this brush of corruption and incompetence. It's grossly unfair. And as a result, there are forces of change within the public administration itself. We were able to bring some of our academic experience and knowledge, and we helped develop the Public Service Amendment Act, which is around removing those powers from politicians to control appointments and to control operational decisions inside departments. So that's the background. Incredibly, the legislation passed in the National Assembly. It passed in the National Council of Provinces, not without quite considerable effort. Yoliswa's team at the NSI played a major role in this regard. It passed in November last year. Interesting, where it was supported overwhelmingly by ANC provincial legislatures and ANC politicians in Parliament. I think that's very significant. My reading of it is that why the ANC has backed this reform now, for the first time, is that I think they are beginning to realize that the future is going to be the future of coalitions, that their dominance in the political scene is over. And I think the ANC has realized that for coalitions or opposition parties to have the kind of control over the public administration which they've had over the last 30 years is not a good idea. And as a result, I think they've supported this reform. It also protects some of their people that are currently in positions. So that's the context. We're in a situation where really, from a legislative point of view, a new opening in South Africa to start building a new public administration. I'm very excited about it. This work, and we can move forward. So this is some of the areas. The work that brilliant. No, clicker. Thank you. Yeah, I forget about these presentations. I'm not good at them. Through a memorandum of agreement with the Department of Public Service Administration, we have had, as the NSI has had access to the Purcell data, at least for the last 20 years of that data, which we've been modeling to see broad trends within the public service. So what we're sharing today are some of the results of that analysis. I think we should reserve some time in this discussion to think about the quality of data coming from the Purcell data. One thing that is immediately clear is that the Purcell data, when you compare it for departmental data as published in annual reports, there are often big differences. Is it a question that the departmental reports are more accurate than the Purcell data? I don't believe that for a moment. I think there are all sorts of inconsistencies in the departmental reports. Departmental reports are also compliance reports around accountability. The Purcell data is a different kind of data. But there are issues around the quality of that data which we have to take very seriously. The way I like to think about it is that what we're looking for are broad trends in the Purcell data rather than for absolute numbers. So that's the caveat which I'm presenting here. In the first iteration of this work, NSI looked at the public service as a whole. We focused on three major departments, the police, nursing, police health, and there was a third, Education, that's right, which are the departments where the vast majority of public servants are employed, and we looked at broad trends. One of the striking trends of that work, and we can move to the next slide, was the degree to which public servants are aging. So policemen are aging. The average age of a South African policeman, I think, was in their 40s, approaching 50s. Teachers and nurses are aging. 80% of senior managers, we'll come to that in a moment, 30% of nurses over 50, 33% of teachers are over 50. And, the new work which we're presenting today is a study of the senior management service. So if there's a general aging of public servants, what you find as well is that young people are not entering the public service, and there are lots of reasons for that. But the age cohorts below 40, for example, it drops dramatically. So there are very, very few young people entering departments. I think it's an enormous opportunity, which we can come to in our discussion, to start bringing in a new generation of public servants and appointing young people into the public service. There is a chronic age crisis in many departments. In the senior management service, if we can move over, it's even more acute. So I think these figures are extraordinary. The table on the right is a comparison between the age profile of the public service as a whole in 2009 and 2024. What you can see is that the number of people younger than 40 was 16% in 2009, not great. The number of people in middle-aged, 40 to 49, well, I think I'm now seeing that Joan Collins has set a new standard for middle age. She's 98 and looking like she's middle aged. So maybe we have to readjust our understanding of middle age. I'm very happy about that, by the way, because I think I qualify then. And those 50 above and heading towards retirement was only 37%. If you look today, according to the age profile on the basis of the Persal data, the situation has deteriorated dramatically. 76% of public servants are over 50%, are over the age of 50. A small 20% are in the category 40 to 49, and there are almost no young people in the public service anymore, in young departments. We did some work on the Public Service Commission itself, actually, and what we found was that young people entered the public service for just long enough to accumulate a little bit of money in their pensions, and then they resigned. So they stayed in the department for at maximum 4 years, and then they were leaving the department. And what it also reflected was there was no prospect of employment in those departments. If older people are remaining in their jobs, if they are not leaving their jobs, which is what this is telling you, there is stagnancy in those departments. There might be turbulence, there might be movement across departments, but as a cohort, older people are remaining in the public service. They are crowding out jobs for young people over the last 30 years. So it's not, even if it was attractive for young people to enter the public service, they're not entering the public service because there are simply no jobs, because older people are not leaving the public service to make way for them. So another slide. So now very few officials are under 40. We saw we saw that in the previous slide. The pipeline is virtually empty. So there's an enormous opportunity for schools of public management, for the National School of Government, to start drawing in young people and training them. And I'll spend a bit of time on that. In education, if the Persal data is correct in terms of numbers, and as I said, there's that caveat around the accuracy of the absolute numbers, in the senior management service in education, that entire senior management service is heading towards retirement within the next 5 years. So the director level, from director to DG within education, are all within a short span going to entering retirement age, which means there is potentially a leadership crisis in the Department of Education, which is going to hit us very, very soon. And even if the numbers are off in absolute terms, the general trend, I think, is spot on. Professor Fikeni, welcome. Health in the Department of Health and nationally, again, we think that retirement cliff is within the next 10 years. So acutely within in Department of Education within the next 5 years, we think senior managers are going to be entering retirement, and generally within the next 10 years, we are looking at a retirement cliff within the public service of people retiring. And as I say here, there is no pipeline. There is no pipeline. Can we move on? So, and this is where I want to end. This is both worrying, but it's also an extraordinary opportunity. South Africa's levels of unemployment are enormous. Youth unemployment is very, very high. There is an enormous opportunity as of now to start bringing young people into the public service, to make public service attractive for young people, and to bring them in, not as a social service, not as a humanitarian gesture, but because it is acutely needed for the longevity and the sustainability of South Africa's public service. So that's the first thing. In absolute numbers, we need new people entering the public service, and we need it urgently. So schools like School of Public Management and Administration, University of Pretoria, the National School of Government, the Wits School of Government, urgently need to expand their remit and bringing in young people for training. So there's a huge training opportunity. There's also a huge opportunity to produce a new kind of public servant. For the last 30 years, we've had a public service that has operated within the context of a dominant party political system under ANC rule effectively, where, as we discussed right at the beginning, there has been a confusion between political roles and administrative roles, and I think it's had a deleterious effect on the ability of those administrations to work. Where government departments have been given autonomy and allowed to recruit professionally, we see them really performing well. The story of the National Treasury is quite extraordinary in that regard. The history of SARS is impressive in that regard. If you look at various state-owned enterprises, they have these interesting histories. I'm busy doing work on Johannesburg. Some of the utilities in Johannesburg, when they were operating relatively autonomously and recruiting professionally, were working pretty well. Hard to believe, but City Power in Johannesburg in the first 10 years of its existence was an effective operation. So we know it works. This is an opportunity, therefore, to train a generation of public servants whose modus operandi is in service of a multi-party democracy rather than in service to a dominant party political system. I think there's an opportunity to train a new kind of public service. So, the final thing is, this is the moment now to build that pipeline. And let me end on this note. The data which we are sharing today, I think, is alarming in terms of the immediacy of that cliff. But at the same time, there is, in some cases, enough time to start building that pipeline now. So yes, a concern, but also an extraordinary opportunity within a general context where the political circumstances have fundamentally changed for us to start building a genuinely publicly oriented public service. So that's why I've said South Africa's third transition. Thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you.
No, man. I'm like, no. Thank you, Ivor. Thank you very much. You've said so many things, but I just want to prepare people for the discussion, especially the younger ones. How do we make public service attractive to you? Very important question, because, I believe I'm young at heart, but I'm old in terms of age. So I can no longer represent you anywhere now. You must represent yourselves. So how do we, through the reforms, make the systems? You have people here, Professor Fikeni here, he's the boss of the system, another boss. Welcome, Prof. So we did acknowledge you in your absence, and we were told you were getting lost. Getting lost in Pretoria, you are so rural, Prof. So on that note, So think about this as the speakers are speaking. And the other thing for me that's important, because we've got quite a number of academics here, is the role of higher education institutions in driving this reform agenda, because this agenda cannot just be left in government alone. The role of higher education. The same way that when we always talk with Ivo, we always say the role of civil society. How do we play as NSI a catalytic role in ensuring that civil society participates? And I think with the processes of developing the legislation, NSI did that very well. But now the challenge is around implementation. How do we play that catalytic role? I'm going to invite our next speaker, Professor Albert Walk, who's going to present on talent management in the South African Public Service, evidence from Provincial Department of Health. I'm interested to know if talent management actually happens in government. Over to you, Prof.
Thanks for
Let me
that.
take this chair out because I'm not going to use it.
Okay, in response to your surprise, the quick answer is not really. Not really. And if it does, it's unbelievably badly done. Okay, so I'm taking a perspective from a business school, folks. But I'm not a totally uninformed business school prof. I was a founding member of the Public Service Bargaining Council. I used to negotiate, represent labor in the old bargaining chambers. And I was a founding member of NEDLAC and represented labor in the Public Finance and Monetary Policy Committee. So I know where it comes from, and I know 1994 Public Service Act. We were very, very involved in, some of these issues, and then the integration of the TBVC states into the public service, and that whole Section 10 of all of that stuff. It brought so many memories. But I've been away from that for, almost 30 years now. At Gibbs, doing business and teaching HR and HR strategy and international business at Gibbs. So Ivan and I had a chat about the data in that first report, and I was gobsmacked. Essentially, do these people not do talent management? How did they drop the ball this badly? There's light at this end of the tunnel, but that light is actually a locomotive coming at you. So Ivor pretty much said to me, go dig into it. And we had a great chat in our over coffee. And so we decided, what's the most, let's get to an interesting department, and it's got to be health. And let's look at 3 of the key provinces and see what they're doing. And then we took their annual reports, we went backwards, and also looked at the personal data. And this is essentially what I found. Talent management is not great, folks. So what is talent management? Talent management is there defined. The process through which organizations anticipate and meet their needs for talent in strategic jobs. So what you do is you essentially say which jobs are critical, and if those jobs are not filled or vacated at any stage, the operation will stop. Okay, the organization will suffer. So you go through a process of identifying those jobs and then looking at the risk that those jobs will be vacated. Okay, that's talent management. And you normally look ahead 5 years and further. So talent management, there's a quick definition of it. It requires organizations to identify the roles that are critical. The roles generally require continuity and normally ones that can't be easily replaced by recruiting in the wider labor market. Because if you shake a tree and you find those skills, you don't need talent management. Okay, this is what, if you work for a multinational like a General Electric, an MTN, that's what your talent management system looks like. At the top, you've got your CEO, your executives, your head of HR, line management, the like. You would then look at your strategy and you would say, that's what our strategy is all about. Then you would have a list of what talent you've got, and you would be looking at not just have they got the skills, are they ready for the next position and things like that. So you would have an audit of your talent. Behavioral competency, technical skills, the whole lot. Qualifications and motivation. These are interesting from a public service perspective. From a multinational perspective, they're also interesting because you want to send expats to run your operations. Then you say, line management owns this discussion. What is our demand? What talent do we need? What talent do we need in the next few years? What have we got? So you're doing a basic gap analysis. And then you start putting this in place, risk mitigation. So these people are at risk of leaving. So our young administrators, they're at risk of leaving. What are we doing? Are we giving them training? Are we locking them in? Are we paying them more? Are we giving them bonuses? All of these things. Have we got a succession plan? So if you're in a big multinational, your critical skills, you would have a cover ratio. So if you were South African breweries in the old days when they were expanding, you had a cover ratio of about 1.6. So 1.6 people who could cover a critical role. Top banks in this country, at executive level, you're sitting with a cover ratio of about 2.5. So there must be 2.5 people who can pick up in case there's a vacancy. Cover ratio is very specific to your organization. And then how do we develop these people to be ready for the next position? Can you see this is what we call a talent pool. So we've identified people who we are developing for the next stage in their careers. Now, why doesn't that happen here? As it turns out, our public service is based on the principles, or its organizational culture is about fairness and transparency. Now, what that means is you can't do talent management. You, as a line manager, cannot identify the successors to positions. Everybody has to have the opportunity to apply for a position. You can't have a talent pool. You are stuck in the 1970s. If that's the way you need to move to efficiency versus that equality and transparency. I did a whole bunch of work on some public service evolution and the culture and the like, and they've moved to that space. You can do it. You absolutely can do it. There are a lot of public services that have moved towards efficiency. Rather than having every time you want to fill a critical position, you have to wait 13 months. Folks, you are taking 13 months to fill critical positions. Okay. How? So that talks to the bottom there. So there's your blueprint for what talent management looks like. Does this look vaguely familiar in the public service? No. Okay. Now, let's look at what's happening with nursing. Now, I decided to focus on professional nurses. These are the nurses with a 4-year degree. These are the highly skilled nurses. They are pretty much the stormtroopers of your health system. Everything is based around these people. And these folks, they come out of university and then they do the additional qualifications. Midwifery, ICU, high care, all of these things. You see all the different bars. So these are your most important people in your health system. And this is how they've grown. Pretty much not much. 50 million population there. 65 million population there. Our population is growing at between 700 and 800,000 people a year. Does that reflect it? And there's COVID, by the way. Okay, so either we were overcapacitated in 2009, or we've got a capacity problem. And then, of course, you've just seen the paper Ivor presented. These are folks on their way out. They're old. Yeah, 30% of them will be on pension in 5, 6, 7 years. Then it gets even better. You've got resignations. What have you done to deal with your resignations? This is your parcel data. Now, if you read the departmental reports of the different departments of health, there's no urgency here. There's no urgency. Folks, is this a worry? Look at Gauteng, the biggest, most populous province. How do we run a national health system? Who's going to staff this thing? Oh, but wait, we're using contract nurses. Look at that. There's the numbers. Okay, this is a bit of a jumbled table, but you get the picture. It's in the report. Pretty much, in our biggest provinces, we're losing professional nurses. Who's filling those roles? Look at the appointments. Remember, COVID was 2020. We are not replacing them. We've got a net loss. We've got a brain drain of nursing skills. Eastern Cape's doing well, you're appointing. Western Cape, you've got a problem. You think the province is well run. They got a problem. They're not even managing this. Nobody wants to move to Cape Town, hey? Or nurses can't afford to live there. I don't know. But you see the problem. You see the problem. There we go. In summary, resignations and appointments. That's out of the parcel data. The parcel data is either wrong or we've got a mess. Folks, does that worry you? Hey?
Yes.
Yeah. And those are old people, by the way. So what do we do, folks? Remember talent management? What did we say? What are we going to do? We're going to build a pipeline, eh? We hopefully have a whole ton of nurses coming through the universities. Oh, by the way, here's the other picture. Guess what we're spending our public service salary bill on? These are people who push paper. This is admin growth. These are not people who can administer a pill or give an injection. These people cannot do health work. Okay? So from a talent management perspective, your problem here is these are overhead. These are not the people looking after sick people. We have a problem. So imagine you're running a factory. Your most critical skill is going to be that machine operator. Your machine operator leaves and you replace them with an admin clerk. You can see what's happening here, hey? Why Gauteng grew like this with admin is beyond me. There's no explanation. Anybody? Any thoughts, folks? Why did Gauteng Health grow like that?
That would be looking at the whole tender aspect and corruption.
I don't know. I didn't find any evidence. I wasn't looking for any of that. Reading the reports, though, folks, these provinces have been spending a lot of money on training. Do you know what they've been training? Do you know what's been eating their budget? Not training nurses to look after sick people, not training nurses in new professions, in new disciplines. They've been sending everybody on training on ethics and management. It's important, but it does not administer injections and look after sick people. Okay, so we've been overwhelmed with ethics training and some leadership training. Now you say, training. The public service has stopped training or stopped training nurses. Are you worried, folks? I am. Gauteng, gone. This is PERSAL data, folks. And that training includes training that would be in the colleges where you're training the professionals, you're training these specific skills and disciplines. It's gone, it's stopped. Now you say the private sector has taken them. No, they haven't. Private sector has started their own training colleges, but yeah, they're even bringing in people from India to fill the gaps. They used to take public service nurses. There simply aren't any. I'm talking professional nurses. I'm not talking auxiliaries and enrolled nurses. There we go. If you look at the data from the South African Nursing Council, nurses have to be registered at the South African Nursing Council. This is what's currently available. That's what was in 2018. Our nurses are going overseas. They're retiring. You cannot have a national health system if you don't have professional nurses. Look at this. Okay, so your question, is there talent management in the public service? Well, the evidence doesn't show it. It does not reflect it. Guys, you're not doing talent management in Gauteng, KZN, or the Western Cape. You may say you are. So what if we did have talent management in the public service, what would it look like? You'd have regular skills audits, gap analysis, I showed you the architecture, supported by appropriate HR information system. As Ivor was saying, what you're seeing in the departmental reports and what you're seeing in the PERSAL data, not always the same. You'd have an alignment of workplace planning more closely with local needs and conditions. You'd need to decentralize this. Could you imagine being a hospital manager in this environment? Hey? When there's a vacancy, even if it's a critical vacancy, you have to go through a huge rigmarole to pretty much re-advertise the position, re-describe the job, and then Treasury's got to sign it off before you can fill a position. It's why you're taking a year to fill a critical position. And these people are going on pension soon. You need to look at a review of recruitment and promotions for all critical posts. If this were a private sector, you'd have a talent pool of nurses that you would move around. You need to have a compelling employee value proposition. Why would you want to be in the public service? And talent in the public service, where it differs from the private sector, talent in the public service is more about their values than anything else. It's about people who want to serve society. So you would be identifying your talent not just on their skills, but most importantly on their value system. and that, and then you'd have to develop them up. You can read the slides, I'll make them available. So immediately, we need to start aligning processes. There are regulations and policy documents from your days where you spoke about talent management and you saw can I say a half-assed effort? No, I can't say that. Okay, a not great effort at doing talent management there. Line managers should be trained and empowered in talent management processes. If you're at General Electric or, any large company, you are responsible for succession planning and making sure that there's cover. And you're mentoring. And of course, we need support systems. Is PERSOL your support system? No, you need a way more sophisticated HR information system to get any of this done. And that's it from me.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Prof. Again, a lot has been said. And I think one of the problems is outdated regulations, because talent management can be done upholding the principles of transparency and fairness. But I think the issue is the public service is very constricted in regulations, and regulations take forever to change. But I think with the opportunities of the regulations for the Public Service Amendment Act, hopefully, Prof, you could keep an eye on that in your oversight role. And anyway, all of us, we have a responsibility to make an input on those regulations. It's an open process, especially those who are the students particularly, because I think there's lots of ideas in you that if you organize yourselves and you make these inputs, even as individuals, they really get listened to at times. That's my experience. So we need to find ways, we need to innovate. It might be that things remain like this because the people in the system are no longer innovating and are no longer really thinking differently about these things. Because remember also, public servants stay very long in their jobs. So they just get comfortable now. They reach an age where they are just working for pension, and they are no longer interested in innovation and in thinking about things outside of the box. So that opportunity is there. The stats in nursing are shocking. Eh? They're really shocking. I'm personally worried about them, but I think it shows in the public health system in many ways that we have this particular challenge. And I guess there's more to do to ensure that we bring attention to policymakers and decision makers on these issues. So again, there's a homework there. Panelists, colleagues who are seated here, we're gonna work today. The next one, so we're getting responses now and reflections. Prof. Gerda is the first one to give us reflections on public leadership, institutional reform, and capacity in the public service. And over to you, Prof. Please continue to write down those questions.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'm listening to what Ivor and what Albert has presented, and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, pipeline, what pipeline? And that is always juxtaposed for me in terms of compliance. We have such a compliance culture in the public sector that I'm not amazed at all that administration has grown so exponentially, as opposed to putting in the effort to make sure that the skills are needed at the front line, at where the wheel hits the tire, or the tire hits the road. Okay, so yes, we've been asked to kind of give comments around the two specific papers that were presented, and specifically looking at public leadership, institutional reform, and capacity in the public service. So I'm going to make some comments with regards to those. looking at what I think is valuable in both of these reports, and then also looking at some of the challenges that have been highlighted, and specifically then commenting on, well, what are the gaps? What don't we know? Okay, so these were the two reports. Both of these reports, I think, are valuable in the sense that they offer an opportunity for us to fundamentally start thinking about the public sector in a different way, but human resource processes within the public sector in a different way. Our concern, however, is that we are presupposing an institutional capacity that does not exist. And I think that makes it a little bit more challenging in trying to see this as an opportunity. If everybody is still very much compliance driven, and if everybody is still looking at making sure that they just don't, they meet the Treasury regulations and they are able to tick the boxes, then you can't create an environment where something like talent management, for instance, can thrive. So in terms of the public leadership, what their reports do promote and what they do focus on is that it is really time for these institutional realities to move away from just conforming to what the governance or the government regulations state, and to become more adaptive, and to realize that the realities that we are facing, these adaptive leadership realities that we are facing, are so challenging and complex that we are requiring our public leaders to be able to be agile and dynamic. And I don't necessarily, when I think about public leaders, think of them as being agile and dynamic, specifically if they're just looking for the bottom line. The value of the personal data is that it highlights vulnerabilities. We see them now. It is maybe an easy out to say, well, create the pipeline. But from what are you going to create the pipeline? If there are no people that are entering and that are being trained, or that are seeing, the young people seeing the public sector as a valuable employer, from where are you going to create that pipeline? So that is a really important precursor, is to try and understand what is it that needs to change around the narrative of the public sector as an employer. And so that it doesn't become an employer where my generation works for retirement, and we see it as a place of security, and we see it as a place that we can't be moved from, so they can't get rid of us. So how we can pretty much do anything because they can't get rid of us. We've got permanent employment and all the benefits that are associated with it, and it's great benefits. But those benefits were important to my generation. They're not important to the generation that's coming. So how do we change the narrative around what is it to be an employer of choice for the younger generation? The strengths of strategic leadership, or the strengths in the report, is that strategic leadership needs to become more anticipating of the changes that are happening in society around us. Now, even if you are, a fairly, maybe a beginner in the use of AI, even if you just go and ask chat, right? What are the future challenges for the public sector? They're not going to give you great results, but they're going to at least tell you, there are certain results that are going to show up in terms of what the workforce is going to require from the public sector, what the public sector workforce is going to require in the future. And that, yes, it does place an enormous responsibility on higher education institutions to start working more closely with our public sector in making sure that what we do produce would be students that are not necessarily, let's be realistic. In 3 years' time, the first year student that I'm producing is going to face a reality that doesn't exist now. It's going to be a different reality. So I'm not trying to teach skills at a higher education institution. I'm not trying to teach you what to think. I'm trying to teach you to think. So that when it comes, whatever the reality may be that you are facing, that reality is something that you can understand, that you can, unpack the problem and have the skills that are needed to be agile in that environment. Because there is nothing that is going to be going to stay the same for the next 10 years, especially not in the public service. So yes, it is really important to identify talent, but it's also equally important to identify that there are institutional vulnerabilities in our organizations that prevent us from identifying what these talented positions are, and to really critically look at how do we recruit for those talented positions. The emphasis is on professionalization and merit-based leadership. Fantastic. How? How? Because yes, we do have a professionalization framework, and we do have a new Amendment Act, and we have the legislation that tells us, you know, you have the freedom to now start doing and to start professionalizing. Based on what? What are we professionalizing? Are we asking them to all become members of the Medical Council? No. Are we asking them to become members of the Engineering Council? Is there a public administration professional body that prescribes the standards and ethics and qualifications that are necessary for us to meet those requirements of being a professional public service? So what does professionalization actually mean? Is it an ethic? Is it a Section 196 of the Constitution? We need to be an ethical public service, or a professional public service rather. And we only understand that as a word, as a value? Or is it something that you can actually say, you know, these are the requirements to be professional, and this is how we meet these requirements, and this is what the kind of determinants would be to say that these are professional public servants and we are professionalizing the public sector. And merit-based leadership, wow, that would be fantastic. Merit-based leadership would be absolutely wonderful if we are able to get there. And I'm not saying that our leaders are not ethical, or that our leaders aren't good, or that our leaders cannot adapt. I think that the ones that are doing such a fantastic job are not always seen. But there are really fantastic leaders in the public sector, but they are not necessarily the ones that make the news. And they are not necessarily the ones whose competencies and whose profile others want to emulate. Okay, when we look at thriving in uncertainty, the reforms around merit-based recruitment, competency assessment, succession planning, constitutional values, all of this would strengthen the leadership legitimacy. But the discussion around separating administrative authority from political influence is not easy. I don't think that maybe in the national and provincial government, where the Public Service Act actually does have an influence, there might be a possibility for us to start driving this separation. But where is it that we are finding the biggest gap? In our municipalities, in our local municipalities. That's where the professional nurse doesn't want to go and work. She doesn't want to go and work where there is no services, where there is a lack of infrastructure, where the roads are more potholes than anything else, where there's a municipality that's under administration, where there is political interference in the appointment of people within that administration. That is where the crux of our service delivery lies. It doesn't lie here in Gauteng or in Sandton or in Joburg or Ekurhuleni. It lies in Ermelo or in Hluhluwe, or wherever our local municipalities are really struggling to find properly skilled and capacitated people to take over the leadership and to ensure that there is enough institutional capacity and appropriate institutional capacity available to make sure that the infrastructure in those municipalities run adequately. So if we look at institutional reform, the findings again regarding the aging police officers, nurses, senior managers, all of that is really, yes, it's alarming. And to me, I'm kind of feeling as though we're back in 1994, 1996, where there was a huge exodus of senior managers from the public service, only to be brought back as contractors. Because we're losing our institutional memory, and we're too scared to lose the institutional memory. So what are we doing now? We're doing exactly the same thing. There is an exodus of, I don't know how many retired, I know it's pharmacists and maybe other kinds of professionals, but that are brought back into the public service post-retirement age to fill a critical skills gap. And that contract employment it doesn't allow sustainability. It doesn't allow for, yes, there might be institutional memory in that contract employer or employee that is being employed, but that does not necessarily mean it's being transferred to the next generation. So that is another, the institutional reform, yes, by all means, give us the guidelines, give us the regulations and the legislation and the policy to be able to do it, but it's the how. It's how we're going to get there. It's how we're going to make the decisions and who's going to make the decisions to ensure that that institutional uncertainty that is going to arise because of the retirements that are taking place, that is appropriately addressed. And then equally important, talent management systems should, as you said, they should be properly conceptualized as to what is realistic for the public service. Because currently we're calling it talent management. I promise you every government department has a talent management strategy, but they see every employee as talent. That's not everyone is not talent. And it's also important that every person understands that they're not talent. They are there, they're an important cog in the machine, but they're not talent. And how do we redefine that, and how do we communicate that, and what is the narrative around that? The public service requires strategic talent pipelines. I agree 100% it does. It just doesn't have it. So if we are now starting with a pipeline, then be realistic about the fact that you're starting with young people who do not have the experience, who do not have the institutional memory, who has to have a period of where they are adapting and maybe changing and contributing to the organizational, institutional change of the public sector, but make provision for that. Have the narrative around a public sector that is changing and not going to look like the public sector of today, because that's not the one that we want. It's not the one that is going to be able to respond to the needs of the future. If implemented properly, these approaches could improve institutional memory, reduce disruption that are caused by retirements, and enhance organizational resilience. But we need to be realistic about what needs to be in place in order for these changes to be effected. Sorry. In terms of governance, the last one, you've both made the comment that we are no longer serving a dominant party state, which is fair, and we are moving towards that more democratic, where our public service needs to be more independent, or impartial rather, unbiased, and not politically influenced. And it is fantastic that we have the policy to support that, and that there is a policy environment that would enable our public servants to develop in that way. What we need to remember is that professional and politically neutral institutions are really important to a public service or a public sector that is seen to be a professional public sector. It's not simply an administrative reform. This is a culture reform. And this cultural reform asks of us, as those that are contributing to the system, that are producing students for the system, it is asking from us to be aware of the barriers that will prevent us from reaching this culture change. And these barriers is an overemphasis on fiscal realities, on freezing of posts, because we are creating a leaner, meaner public service. You don't create a leaner, meaner public service by freezing posts. You need to do a good audit of where is what needed and where is who needed, and fill that. Because the fiscal realities are currently determining how our public service operates. And you're asking why young people don't go into the public service. Young people don't go into the public service, in my opinion, because they don't get the opportunity to go into it. They are being used as interns. Sometimes the interns are absorbed, sometimes. Most often they are not. So they might be getting a 1 to 2 year experience, not enough to get a position in the public service. They are moving away, they've gotten some experience, and now they're moving away from the public service because they are seeing that their future, their career, isn't in the public service because the public service is not agile enough, it's not adaptive enough, it's not innovative enough, it doesn't allow them to use their discretion or their authority or their experience to influence the culture. They get into the organization and they're being told how they're supposed to behave, what they're supposed to do, what are the skills that are needed, and they hear, because we hear constantly, you're not ready for the world of work. You're not ready for the world of work. And that might be true in terms of actual skills. Maybe they can't compile a budget. But does that make them not ready for the world of work? I don't think so. If they know what questions they're supposed to ask in order to compile a budget, they're ready for the world of work, but the organization is not ready for them. Okay, that's where I'm going to end off. Thank you very much.
They were close to saying amen. I could just hear, people agreeing with their professor. I think, Prof, there's opportunities for young people in the public service. One of the final projects I worked in with the team was around a special dispensation to enable those who are 55, between 55 and 60, who want to exit the public service, not to get penalties. Of course, that process must be managed because you don't want to erode skills. So where the specialist skills that are required and etc., the heads of departments can refuse the applications. And I don't know how that process is unfolding, but I saw that that was ultimately approved. It was delayed a bit because I think with the interface with the bargaining councils and etc., I don't know how it's performing. But I think the idea around that was that you use that opportunity. Imagine if you just got 30,000 people out of the system. I think we're targeting 30,000 in terms of the calculations we did with Treasury. If you get 30,000 people out of the system and you create opportunities, you bring 30,000 young people in the system and you support them, you understand that they are new in the system, you do a proper leadership, coaching and supporting program, and NSG also comes on board and do a proper skills program, because indeed in universities you are teaching them how to think. You're not teaching them skills. So there's that gap of skills that they need to learn in the place of work, but in a manner where they are supported. These are big visions, big things. You know, we can't stop ideating about things, even if they may not happen in future, but put it out there so that maybe somebody can pick it up and do something. So I'm saying this to say that where we will lose it, if it's just two people, we feel each post as people exit, or we do something as people exit, because we just absorb people into a culture that's existing. They become part of that culture. But if you are very deliberate in also dealing with the culture issues, you have to do things differently. So there is those opportunities, and I do wish that somebody can pick up some of these things and be able to run with. The last comment I would say, compliance burden. It's a thing that personally I've struggled with as a DG DPSA a lot, because sometimes you get these requests and you see, this is unreasonable what we're asking for here, but the regulations, the laws are there. They want you to do this. If you don't do it, this man is going to chase you. Public Service Commission is going to come for you. And trust me, they come very hard for you. I've experienced them. They come very hard for you. So you always like, no, this is not how we should be doing things. But now I have this regulation, and the process of changing this regulation is forever, and a decision must be taken now. So that, and there's absolutely no flexibility to work around regulations, to work around the laws and these other things, the directives that are there. It's a serious challenge. I've lived it. I've lived it when I was a head of department in Gauteng for community safety, and when I was a DG at DPSA. I've lived it. I know that challenge. And I become a queen of compliance when I didn't even want to be a queen of compliance, because I have to write back and advise the minister and say, unfortunately, this person with all this experience that they have, they do not meet the qualification requirements, and therefore they can't be appointed in that office of the minister. And then I attract problems for myself. When I write such things, I attract lots of problems for myself as a head of a department. But so that's the challenge that we have to also deal with. But thank you, Prof, so much. And now our last presenter is Professor Fikeni, who is also, we know he's the chairperson of the Public Service Commission. He's reflecting on public sector leadership, governance, and the future of public service. Thank you. Prof, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sis Yoli, Program Director. I come from a family of priests, so I keep looking for a pulpit each time I'm given a chance to speak where I have to put my hands on. Again, thanks to my brother Ivo. We've been following each other since the days of the HSRC and different meeting places. And I just marvel at the energy and the persistence you have once you have identified certain topics. And also to my fellow panelist, Conrad Adenauer Foundation, we've worked with you. I don't know now, it's more than, in fact, my first publication chapter was when I was at the University of Transkei, 1996, on traditional leadership, and it was funded by your institution. And I was very young then, and at times with all the kinds of energy. And University of Pretoria, a premium institution in our country. First, I was not delayed by not knowing where the university is. I was just brought into the issue of the study groups, which Parliament wants us to make an advisory note on because GNU partners have complained about it. So, so I think some of the party members are also in the office as we speak. I have nothing to say after such brilliant speakers have spoken, but I'll take my time to say so. And I have no PowerPoint, but I hope I'll still present points with power. So I'll just highlight a few things here. I appreciate the reports that have been released and appreciated the reflections which are there. The starting point, there is no institution that I can think of that is as important as the public sector. No private company can replace it. At some stage, some people even thought, no, you must have less government. Government must be small so that the society functions. And we've seen with the 2008 financial crisis, with COVID, with many other challenges, that the institution of public service is irreplaceable. That's the starting point. It's the luxury of the few of us who can be in Steyn City, midstream, waterfall, where everything is within reach. You almost sometimes forget that there's the world out there. But the rest of the people depend on public service. So the only way for us to fix our society is to pay greater attention on how public service can be fixed. Because there is no plan B where you say, no, one day there will be no public service. Things will just run either by the private sector and so forth. So that's the starting point. It is the largest service provider, as the Prime Minister of Mauritius once said. And it is very often the largest employer in many countries. And it's where many people depend on. But I want to just quickly make this point that perhaps we have to understand and periodize the evolution of our public service up to this point. You had the apartheid regime, which had a very technocratic capable public service, but the ethical dimension was what was lacking. At the point of transition, that's when the Public Service Commission, which had been in existence since 1912, responsible for training, for bursaries, for human resource planning, for job studies, for trend analysis, for promotions, for recruitment, for talent management. At that particular moment, the new constitution said, let's restrict the powers of this institution to do the oversight. That's when the Department of Public Service and Administration was then created to set the norms and standards when before it was the PSC. There was a reason for that. The comrades coming from abroad who have been part of the liberation, the homelands that had to be integrated into the new administration, the old apartheid administration, they were not trusting each other during the Sunset Clause. They said, if we leave this PSC, because there are instances, there is a book that is about to be published about the history of the Public Service Commission since 1912 till present. There are some prominent leaders who the incoming government said, we want you to the HOD or DG, and the PSC said, nope, according to our records, you studied in Bulgaria, your degree is equal to a diploma, so sorry. And then they said, nope, you do not have the requisite qualifications. That's when they felt a transformative public service ought to be in place. And indeed, the first cohort of leaders who were DGs at the time were top-notch. Up till today, people like Andile Ngaba, who was a DG, he's now running a global company laying cables under the sea. People like, Dr. Nzaluba at Department of International Relations, highly respected. He's now a top leader at Discovery. People like Gabashe and Dr. Rolkoza, when they led ESCOM, it was ranked #1 in the world, 2001 to 2003, which means the first 10 years, you have a wave of capable leaders in the new dispensation. However, when they left, there was no pipeline or succession planning. The standards went down. And it was not only public servants. I know that some have resuscitated the YouTube clip which I did for parliamentarians to say, when I used to go to Parliament for the Portfolio Committee in the 90s, in the early 2000s, you could see quality. Now you go now, it has just plummeted. So the collapse and the recession when the patrimonial systems start taking root, it's both political and public service. So that is the ecosystem that was feeding each other at that particular moment. And not only that, to your point, Prof, police colleges were closed, teacher training colleges were closed, nursing colleges were closed, agricultural colleges were closed, teaching colleges were closed. Then you send a person to a university. In the teaching colleges, they would even teach you where you stand in a board because they were specific. You come to the university, they say the pedagogy of the oppressed is philosophy at a high level. How to mark a register, how to prepare people for school. You come to a university, the first thing you hit is Frantz Fanon. It's everything, is the ideation. The day you meet a student, you do not know how to hit them with, Paul Freire. You do not know what to do. So at a very basic practical level, we minimize the maximum and maximize the minimum. We majored in minors. We closed universities. shrunk them down to 23. I was part of the measure managers. When many university countries at the point of independence actually expand, they specialize. Size and shape, as we're merging, we couldn't describe what this new comprehensive university would look like. We spent 10 years, 15 years, technicons fighting with the universities and so forth. And that is where we ought to have been having a pipeline of producing the next cohort of public servants. Fast forward. Then we fell into a difficult period of patronage, where corruption became the primary currency. And I'm developing a concept which I call, after the exposure into public service, you get your shocks as an academic. I realize that these inefficiencies are not by default, they are by design. Hence I call them the political economy of inefficiency. When you see fragmentation, when you see the conformance and the compliance culture instead of the implementation and impact, it is not by default. It's a multi-billion industry to create inefficiency. When you have 60 billion medical legal claims in hospitals because records are missing, because things are not digitized, it's not a mistake. Somebody's eating there, a nurse, somebody else is sort of, every time you get the best lawyer, you say, Advocate Ngai Toby Senior Counsel, we want you to be part of us. And you have seen him dazzling things. Once he comes in, laws say you can't be a lawyer, you have to procure other lawyers. That's the inefficiency of the process. It just promotes stupidity. When you see what has happened in the country, go to Sentin. Audit firms are the ones fastest growing. Lawyers are the ones buying 47 million houses because we have created a monster that is not meant to function. So what then we need to do is just go back to common sense, because this is an acute common sense deficit. I mean, let me give you one simple example. There was a time when for 6 months news were running. Books could not be delivered to schools, textbooks in Limpopo and the Eastern Cape. You know, if you ask your aunt from a township or a village, we have a problem of books to be delivered. In 1 week, they'll go to a taxi rank, they'll get people with bakkies and say, give me a delivery note. Not in public sector. They will give you 17 reasons why it can't be done. You see, we will go to the state law advisors. We will come back to you. At that time, the school is continuing. So that, to me, is the problem that we ought to be working on. And it should no longer be a matter of state. Think tanks like yours, universities, everybody else, Public Service Commission, National School of Government, because the moment you say it is their problem, it will affect all of us. There'll be a day we will not have enough salary to go for discovery. We need a public hospital. So it is in our interest to deal with that. So with the Zondo Commission, it has exposed our nakedness. Madlanga Commission, it's real time. I mean, some people now, I'm told, have withdrawal syndromes since they have taken a break because they could not live without looking at it. But at the same time, though, when we are about to be depressed, we should be looking at case studies such as SARS, which was almost on the doldrums, but it returned. We should be looking at case studies in some areas, even the licensing centers, which have modernized, the home affairs centers, which modernized, and you begin to see some upward trajectory and ask, how have they done that? AG, how have they done that? So some of the reforms we often forget when we talk of the public sector, that the constitutional bodies, at the point when it became clear that the country was going down, it took the public protector and the leadership and the deep sense of conviction and the risk at her personal level to say, Mr. President, this far, not any further. And this is not what you find in other countries. Other countries are prepared to go to war rather than just look at the Epstein files. Other countries are prepared to go to war instead of going for the corruption charges. And they do not have the similar level of transparency. But the key thing is, what is to be done? The first one, we have professionalization framework. We fought, it was approved. How do we then translate the framework into something that is implementable? The second one, the Public Service Amendment Act now in place, which begin to delineate the roles, but also allow for transferability of people from national to provincial to local government. How do we make those things work? How do we change our business schools like GIPS and others and public administration institutions to say, let's partner? Operation Vulindlela has shown private sector, public sector, think tanks working together. They begin to work. The rescue of our freight and rail, it's been that model. Rather than stepping back and saying it's not my crisis. We do have now the Public Service Commission bill. Both parliaments have passed it. For the first time, our powers will extend to local government, to state-owned companies, to state entities. And PSC role is not just to find you when you have done something wrong, but rather to say, can we change this department? Like now, with the Minister of Social Development, we didn't just analyze her and helped her exit. We said one of the recommendations, can we mobilize all role players to change the department governance system? Then you do have lifestyle audit, which ought to be rolled out. Universities ought to be saying, how do we assist that to be implementable? We do have several other reforms taking place, like the one of the IT system, how to integrate the information, the white paper on local government and so forth. But I want to end by saying, what is the future of public service? The first one, it's for the leaders to be trained in anticipatory governance. What's going to happen in future, the future studies. So that they do not just focus on how we solve what Zondo Commission said, but what is unfolding. What are the mega trends? If I take my head now of being into Lamity scenarios, what are the mega trends that are driving changes? Geopolitical conflicts, that VUCA moment. And that geopolitical volatility has led to coalition creation. How do we establish regulatory mechanisms to scaffold those coalitions? Because coalitions can work well, but you need to regulate them. But also, how do we professionalize politicians as well? Because what are the chances of the recent Minister of Social Development, if you were a professional working under her, she has just about too many challenges. What are the chances of her having to listen to a strategic planning when she has to deal with the grocery and the food aid, has to deal with the flight to New York, has to deal with a boyfriend somewhere, has to deal with everything? So why don't we put a limit to who can be a candidate? Kenya has that. You can't be a candidate without a diploma upwards. Since 1994, we've been giving free scholarships and bursaries, even if you are an employee at local government. Then you have this person who has evaded all those and say, I want to be a leader. Doesn't that tell you something? This person hardly has, we got a letter at the PSC which said some councillors in KZN, they want to be taught on how to read and write. Now, the same person is the chair maybe of a water engineering committee because they have numbers. They do not know whether this is a kilogram or a liter. Never mind the engineering language. How would you have evaded anything that looks like education for 32 years with bursaries, with ABED, with adult education? Then you come and say, guys, I'm ready to lead. We just have to, there is something in our country that is just unserious. You took Cloudy, no metric, say here's SABC. Later when we say SABC is on its knees, if a person can read the balance sheet, he sees the asset register and the asset value, he says, guys, you are hiding this money, there is money. He doesn't realize it's buildings, not money. So we just have to start by being serious as a country. The next one, AI-driven tech revolution. How can we harness that? Have AI governance and so forth. Monitor, trend analysis, pattern recognition using that AI. Integrate data and digitalize the system such that if you have disappeared from province A, you have stolen there, you want to reappear in another province, this thing will just say, even if you say, I got the numbers and the stakeholders, the computer will say, not this one, because you have the biometric data. Now, here, people will disappear here, HOD here, you disappear in this province, you disappear, then you reappear in a higher position. Well, one of few places where you fail upwards. So that is one of the problems. AI can assist there. The third one, climate change and frequency of disasters. How do we have this anticipatory governance such that people can say, in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, if it's a water crisis, for example, then population migration, immigration, not just the inward migration from outside, the migration internally. Nothing is managing it. How do you then plan your policy in the process? And there is an institution, I would have spoken about the collapse of this thing called family, which we might think it's far, because that's where values, it's the primary socializing agent. If it has collapsed, then you send this child to a school, hoping that they will salvage this person. Then you send them to church. Churches, I gave a speech in the South African Council of Churches the other year, and the topic was church has become a crime scene itself. It needs to be surrounded by ribbons. So that in itself and how it relates to the public service value creation. There is an institution called Human Resource Development Council. It's chaired by the Deputy President as the head of government business. It has premiers. it has ministers, it has universities, it has PSC, it has DBSA, it has everybody, except that they have never taken their role of human resource development strategy seriously. I would therefore suggest that these presentations, your reports, be taken into such forums so that where all policymakers and all key role players, TVET colleges are there in their forums, the labor unions are there, but we hardly ever use that because the engineering and the repositioning of the country ought to start there. But most important, leadership must have this anticipatory governance where they think both about the future. Because if we say this is what happened with Zondo, we run a risk of using more of a rear view mirror than a windscreen. As we deal with the current challenges, there are fast-moving changes, and we just have to work together. And I recognize my friend from the World Bank right there as well. So, to me, my call is South Africa is known for policies, for ideas. How do we translate those into a meaningful dialogue between knowledge and practice, where universities and think tanks come down to the valley to work with departments which are most vulnerable, and we work out solutions. PSC is ready to create such avenues of participation. We have been invited even to the reform of the police service. We do not have all what it takes, but we do have the convening power. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. I wanted to congratulate the PSC earlier on for that judgment. I can't remember the name of the judge now, about your powers in public administration across, not just in public service. I think when I read the judgment, it affected Parliament specifically, but when I read it, I thought this is what the PSC has been raising, so now the matter is resolved. Congratulations, Prof. and the team. And interestingly, it's a case that happened long ago, and I think it was important for the PSC to represent itself in terms of that particular case when it went to court. You know, Prof, one of the things in government is that there is bursaries. So public servants spend more times in universities. During the period of exams in universities, if you are leading a government department, you know a high percentage of your people are not at work. And I saw last year they introduced some adjustments in terms of study leave. It's 2 days now, isn't it? Before you write, there's somebody from DPSA there who is in the bargaining council. 2 days. So you get 2 days off before you write an exam. So which means you get 3 days off because the third day is the actual day of writing exams. And you don't have a limit of how many courses you can register. So if you decide to do 7 courses in a year, you're gonna have 7 times 3, 21 days. That's on top of your leave, your sick leave, and other nice leaves that you have in the public sector. And because of the culture of the public service, there are times when people are not meaningfully engaged. They may be in a disagreement with their supervisors or the politicians, so they are put in a cold room. We call it a cold room. And they study. I don't know, I think Ms. Oliphant said this loudly, so I can quote her. I think I heard her saying something like, when she realized that she was having problems with politicians, because she works very closely with politicians. Ms. Oliphant is Lumka, the one who has been an activist at social development, the one who was fired there. So she says, when I realized that, no, I no longer having real work to do here, I mobilized my team, we registered to study. I got my master's degree. She graduated her master's degree this year. And so people in government do that. She's so Prof has been watching her do. No, she's doing pole dancing. Prof is not aerobics. She does pole dancing and she showcases it on TikTok. So she has the time, and she had the time. So this is quite interesting because now a study we did or an assessment we did in the public service. Just on the issue of qualifications of employees, that whilst you have some who are not qualified, and most of those not qualified being pre-2016 regulations, which changed the requirements for qualifications at SMS, you also have a group of public servants who have on average 2 or 3 degrees. They attend religiously. They study religiously, but the question is, what is the impact? I'll leave it there. So the issue of scholarships and bursaries is very important. So my last comment is, I'm doing a research. I said I'm doing my PhD, and I'm researching on implementation of public policies. I'm assessing specifically the professionalization framework, but I'm broadly looking at why we struggle with implementing public policies. One of the things that's coming out very strongly is leadership. There's other things, but leadership. So the point you are raising around leadership and the capacity to anticipate, because you do a policy now, you think that as the leader who has been there for long, you are going to implement that policy the way things have been done. And yet you should anticipate that things are going to be different, and you have to really respond differently in terms of how you support implementation of this policy. So that is a critical issue that's coming through. But having, now it's your time, colleagues, to engage them. They've been talking to you. You also need to have an opportunity to talk to them, and I want to see hands. And I can also be feminist when I want to be. So ladies and sisters, you are not going to sit there and be quiet. Here we are going to speak. I'm going to start this side at the back. Can I see all the hands this side? There's 1 from the back, 1, 2 on the corner here, 3. There's a young lady there. Show your face to me so that I don't skip you. Yes. 3. There's number 4 here. Is there another hand in this corner? Where was your hand up, sir? Yes. 5, 6. I'm going to give you in that order. And please introduce yourself, where you come from, and who your question or your comment is directed to. And please, let's keep to 1 minute per person so that we can give others a chance as well. Okay, maybe, I don't even know when we are supposed to finish this program because I'm free for the whole day. So you're operating on my time, basically. Ivo says 12:30, and Ivo is very strict on time, but today he's going to have to chill a little bit. Over to you. Please, guys, straight to the point. Don't want to disturb you.
Thank you. My name is Zweli Mukweno from the city of Tshwane. President Ramaphosa once said in his 2022 State of the Nation that the government cannot be a biggest employer. It's not an employer, but the academics, they also want an entrance of that particular government that the president has refuted to be an employer. How do we bridge the gap? Because the academicians are making a point on their corner and the politicians are making a point on their corner. Prof. Somadoda, let me stress you more. The Constitution gives these councillors an executive and a legislative right to make laws. While we're saying they are not, I'm from a municipality. We keep on doing councillor capacity building of some sort, and we compromise service delivery on the ground. They don't have matric. I do agree with you, but they've got legislative and executive powers given by the same constitution, and they are being claimed to be autonomous. How are we going to bridge that particular gap? Thank you.
In that order, 2 is.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Makabo Tsinkeng. I'm an investment specialist in the energy sector, and I also work with high school students on weekends. I wanted to just kind of add a comment around making the public sector attractive. Having studied at UP, I recall, I think I'm going to try without the mic.
We need it for. Okay, maybe let me switch off. Maybe I am the problem. I don't know. I don't even know if it's switched.
I think it's a bit better, yeah. Thank you so much. Apologies for the noise. Having studied at UP, my first degree, I noticed that on career days, we often had companies in the private sector coming to, speak to us as students, and I felt that they gave a defined career path. Which made this very attractive for young learners. And I think that perhaps the public sector could do the same. And secondly, I'd also like to say that I think what's out in the media for young kids that they consume is that you're better off in fields like engineering, medicine, accounting. And kids are often made to feel like they're not good enough if they're not in those fields. So I think if we can remove for the lack of a better word, classism around certain careers and work on nurturing a child and the talent they bring and make each child feel that they have a unique contribution to the economy, maybe perhaps then we will see a greater movement into various sectors, including the public sector.
Thank you for that. Yep.
Greetings to everyone. My name is Saklo Labulani. I am an honors student at the university. So my question is also linked to the question that she asked, which is related to how do we make the public sector attractive to us as young people who ought to be part of the public sector in the near future. So probably all the speakers spoke about how the public sector suffers from inefficiency and the inability to kind of implement policies. So I really wanted to kind of introduce or introduce or put out there the factor of cooperations between our universities and the the NSG, which I feel like it's very important because we are like students who are doing public administration. We have the critical thinking, but we lack the skills that are necessary. So I really think that the NSG, if it could create a graduate program for us as students to kind of have a practical experience besides the internship, because we know that the internship the internships that are advertised are very limited. So an addition of a graduate program that is basically for public administration students would be like a great pipeline for us to kind of get the experience and kind of transform the public sector as a whole. Because I remember I'm someone who has like a youth program in the BCM municipality. When I went there looking for a venue, the manager or the person who was assisting me there was like, "Yo, not today, I'm lazy, it's raining, why do you come on this day?" Which signifies the lack of professionalism within the sector and the struggles that we come into as young people within the public service. So I really think more training needs to be done for us as well, who are coming into the system, instead of only focusing on people who are already public servants. So yeah, that's it.
There was another hand somewhere here. Yeah. I believe you are disciplined. You won't hijack the mic. Not you specifically, everybody.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Pauline. I'm from DPME. My question, or rather the suggestions to how to make public service attractive, because I'm already in the system of government and I'm talking from experience. Within government, there is no leadership. There is so much inaccountability that exists, and also indecisiveness. So if these three for me could be tackled, especially from the higher powers, we will have a public service that attracts, because nobody wants to go in an institution where, things will just be laxed and not accountability is there. So those three for me are key. Thank you.
Yep.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Albertus Kuman. I'm with the World Bank. Thank you for all of the presentations. It's been extremely thought-provoking, very interesting. So I have a lot of questions, but I'll keep it limited. I want to start over with your presentation on the third transition, as you call it. I want to hear your thoughts on what it will take to make this work and to ensure that we end up with an independent and professional public service. And the reason why I ask this is we know from the Zondo Commission, we know from the Public Service Commission's reports that in many cases it's not just the legal framework that's been the problem, but also the informal processes working in parallel that undermine the processes. We know from CADA deployment that there's been a lot of politicization at the senior level, but from the Public Service Commission's reports, we also know that this is something that is found throughout the public sector. In the existing, or the previous framework, I should say, ministers did have the authority to delegate these appointment functions to lower level officials, and in many of those cases that still led to politicization. So if we're now having DGs appointing people, is that sufficient to ensure that we don't see the subversion of these processes and that we don't have a new form of politicization taking hold? So I'd be interested in hearing from you what you think needs to be done in addition to these legal reforms to ensure that this works, and to speed up the process for this transition, because I realize we're not coming from a blank slate. We're working with the existing public sector that has been politicized. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's a last hand.
I'm Abdul Sawali. I'm from Critical Leadership Academy. I've got two issues: leadership and management. That issue is actually a constraint brought about by the universities. Let's take at the doctoral level. The assumption is I know what I know and I know what I don't know. That's the biggest challenge. You produce managers at a doctoral level, not leaders. You don't come from a perspective that I don't know what I don't know and I don't know what I know. Until that the premise on which doctorates are based, they are designed for stable times, which are no longer anymore. It's a big challenge. Until universities rethink even the approach to doctoral research, we shall not get out of the challenge we're having here. That's the biggest challenge. I listen to professors and I'm saying, hey, good grief, why is he a professor? No, I do that.
Yeah, the professors.
No, that is normal. I got my doctorate 27 years ago. It's not a normal situation, but it's a challenge. It's a big challenge. Two, when we talk about bridging the leadership and management divide. She's from Department of Monitoring and Evaluation. There is no system at all. You measure outputs, inputs. Those are not performance measures. A person, you tell me you have delivered a rod. A rod is not a performance measure. Just tell me what that road has impacted the people.
Yeah.
It is not there. And, unfortunately, 27 years ago, I sat down in a session with the chief director, with MECs and everybody. And the chief director was saying, please, Abdul, don't take us into development social work because we are going to lose our jobs. This is the chief director. And it's the same thing which is coming through day in, day out. So I'm saying we can talk all this. You will not deliver on as long as there is no performance indicator. I was saying to my friend here, if you go to a department I've got social development, I've got digital technology and everything. And I'm asking, what is the indicator of performance? Everybody will have his own performance indicator. There is no common indicator of performance in which everybody is driving to. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, I think let's get the responses and then we'll come through this side. There's one burning hand that side that wanted to speak, but did I not you? Okay, I'm gonna start here in the second round because I don't want to overwhelm them too. I'm gonna come back. Yeah. Here are the questions that have been, some are comments, some are questions, so I'm going to give it to you. But there's Pauline speaks about no leadership, no accountability, no decisiveness. And she's correct. And I would like us one day to pursue, it may not be today, how do a unionized workforce contribute to this? Because what I've seen in the public service, managers are very scared to do anything because they're scared of the unions. It's a reality that managers live under. And if you speak to them, they're going to tell you that they can't move on this because they are scared of the unions. When they take the unions head on, they're not going to be protected by anybody, by any system. So they are on their own. That's just, I'm throwing it for the future. You don't have to say anything about it now, but let's start here.
I'll take those mostly as comments. Important comments, and I think this is why this question of that we're on the cusp of a major demographic change, where there's a possibility of at least of engaging many of the practices, pathological or malevolent practices that you're describing, with the production of a new generation of public servants. And that generation is coming whether we like it or not, but I think we can get ahead of that process and try and shape the kind of generation that's emerging. The question around what will it take to implement the PSS, the Public Service Amendment Act. I mean, let me give you two answers at different levels, though. The first one, and Gad, after this conversation, I want to come and speak to you, is around developing a whole range of regulations to prevent the gaming of the relationship between the political and administrative. We're already working on that, and I think this will be important. I mean, how do we prevent malicious compliance with the Public Service Amendment Act and the separation between the political and the administrative? We know that we have ingenious politicians and public servants, and they will find a way around it. So we want to try and deal with that. But I want to be more optimistic. This crowd is a very pessimistic crowd, and the presentations have been so. I don't think don't underestimate the importance of the deepening of South Africa's democracy, which has happened since last year. The election that took place in 2024, I think, was historical and decisive. We've moved away from a dominant party political system. The ANC lost its majority. It's now operating through coalitions, and it looks like, by all the polls that are coming out now, the ANC are going to get one heck of a hiding in the local government elections, especially in the large metros. So we're in a new epoch. Associated with that, and this is what I think is incredibly, incredibly encouraging, South Africans are starting to choose parties and vote on the basis of the performance of that party in government or the promise of their performance in government. In other words, South African voters are using public administration issues now as electoral issues. They've become political issues for the first time, well, at least since 2016. I think that's very promising. And what it means is that there's now a genuine political incentive to implement these regulations, because parties are now being judged by the electorate on the degree to which they perform in government. In my analysis, these regulations of the Public Service Amendment Act are foundational to the better performance of administrations, and political parties now need administrations to be working better in order to deliver on their promises as governments. So that's my answer to that, and that's why I'm optimistic going forward. Not naively, I believe, but because I think structurally our political environment has changed.
Thank you very much. Maybe let me start with the one of exposing younger people to public service. We do have the sitters which are sitting at any given time on 20 billion rands to 27 billion. And they seem not to be able to spend it. That's the opportunity. I've asked for a meeting to meet with the chairs and the CEOs of the SETAs so that we deal with this. At the Human Resource Development Council, they received a hiding, and the public is beginning to raise these issues. We always need this kind of infusion. I do have an intern in my office, is from this university. Boitsepo is here, and is one of the best students you have exposed. Whenever I go to meet with the ministers, with the ambassadors and so forth, I bring her along. Of course, another advantage, she speaks Mandarin, so I start saying greet in that language. So, so that exposure, I think money is there in this country. Money in South Africa is everywhere except where it is most needed. Then you do have the UIF, the Unemployment Insurance Fund. They were given 14 billion for youth employment facilitation. They returned 13.7. And this has happened for 3 years in a row. It just is one of those things which are just heart-wrenching. So we are calling these institutions, and we've met with the Minister of Finance to say, let's partner in order to deal with these inefficiencies. If they do not have capacity, let them shout early so that universities, other agencies, and other people are brought in. Indeed, NSG, we will relay the message that they come and do the job talk so that they amplify. PSETA can also do that. On the issue of Zweli, the gap between the capacity in the municipalities, I don't think it is the constitution per se that protects them. Constitution is crafted in such a way that you could come up with legislations. I don't think you would have a constitution that says if you are uneducated, illiterate, you should be leading something that you will not even understand. And I think the reason we've been having these workshops in the public service, workshops are done not for education and knowledge, they're done for compliance. Hence, they will organize anything. One time I met people who were being taught on conflict resolution. These were PAs. And I said, what on earth? No, it's because money had to. We are in a democracy that favors conformance over performance, that favors compliance over impact. And people have mastered the templates, they fill them, and we create an optical illusion of performance. And it is for that reason that annual report looks so glowing, because it's for performance, grading, it's for pay progression, for renewal of contract. But when you take the same annual report to the community, where the department is supposed to have a mandate, they can't relate to this elegant picture that you have. Until we have performance management systems, monitoring systems, impact monitoring systems that speak to why there is a gap between our self-reporting as departments and the impact on the ground. And most of the time, it happens with no consultation with the people on the ground, by the way. The Constitution says people should be consulted. Some people you find in a village, in our citizens forum, they see 10 tons of bricks. What are these going to be constructing? We don't know. Government just brought them. Sometimes the whole thing is created, like the OR Tambo Nkandolo village, but not handed to the community. After some time, people cut the fence to bring in the goats there and the sheep to graze, because public service has become self-service instead of public service. On the gap between knowledge and practice, having been an academic for 3 decades or so, There's nothing as fundamental as universities having to do the soul searching as to whether there is a meaningful dialogue between knowledge and practice, whether there is a transfusion between those in the practicing sector and those who are generating knowledge, so that knowledge on its own become a very expensive exercise. Practice without knowledge is also a blind date for disaster. So we must be saying, how do public servants, how do industries, how do people in the universities reimagine the future where experiential learning is embedded? When medical school started at the University of Transkei, everybody was laughing, but the approach was it will be community-based and experiential learning-based. Whilst other universities, people were going to the third year, the fourth year, async there. After some time, they had to come back to that because it was embedded on the experience on the ground. So I do think that that call to say, are universities still relevant? Can they move closer? Universities generate knowledge on change management, on innovations, except that they are very difficult to change themselves. They are more like enzymes. They change other things except themselves, even when you talk transformation and so forth. So I do think that that point should be taken as a challenge for introspection. And lastly, I would simply say that let's also celebrate some of the small victories and the opportunities that are coming. For example, coalition has brought in certain checks and balances. You have a minister from party A, a deputy minister from another party, chairperson of the portfolio committee from another party, and they are checkmating each other. Not because ANC has a copyright of being corrupt. All other parties, if they are given a chance to be exposed to power, we've begun to see elements that if they had 60%, they would behave like the ANC. If they had more power, they would behave the same. And of course, the breakaway parties from the ANC still have the genetic traces of the parent. So all these things, we should take them into account. Thank you very much.
I can't agree with you more in the need for universities to be really reflective and to, especially at a PhD level, if you exit your PhD knowing that you don't know, then you've actually mastered something. And that I think is an important skill that we need to embed. I always return to, yes, we keep on talking, but there is action that is needed. Action is needed. We need to know how. How do we do this? And in order for us to know how we do it, we need to understand why are we doing it. And especially if you look at younger people coming into the public sector, understand why they would want to go into the public sector. We're running a really, really successful internship program with BESITA. University is not benefiting from it at all. We're not making money through it, but the benefit to the student is immeasurable. The feedback that we're getting in terms of our curriculum is immeasurable. Those are things that we really need to start partnering with. But now we're getting the message we're not allowed to run another internship program with BESITA because DHET is telling us we're skewing our composition. We're creating a false composition of our public, of what our university composition looks like. So now we've got an oversight body telling us, now what you're doing, the benefit that you're adding, the experience that you're giving your students, because of compliance and oversight, now we're seeing a spike in EE that is not really there because the university hasn't really transformed, but we've brought in interns, and now the interns are part of the university, and that is skewing the picture. So, I mean, seriously, are we, cutting our nose to spite our face here, or are we really wanting to transform? So to me, the how and the why we're doing things, those are the questions that we need to answer, and that's where the conviction lies.
Thanks for that. Yeah, I agree, absolutely. Managing in a union-heavy environment, yeah, you have that problem. I was one of those unionists. I was one of the organizers of the first national public service strike, where, yes, we actually marched on Department of Finance back in the day, back in Becky's day. Yes, it is difficult. You're going to have to manage that, but your culture has to change. You have to manage it. They have to be partners in it. You show them the kind of data that, the nursing data, and that's only one example. There's many of these. You will get buy-in there. Their members will be alienated. Nurses are good people, and they don't like striking. The Florence Nightingale thing is very, very strong with them. And there's some good, very professional people in the public service, and they want to make a difference. They want their life to be meaningful. So I would suggest it's a cultural thing. Are there performance measures? Absolutely, there are performance measures. If you read through their reports, as I did with the health, you actually see the performance measures, and they're accounting to Parliament. But when they miss the measures, you can see there's a fair amount of fudge. And I was looking at which measures they've missed, which of their programs they're not implementing because they're short of skills. So that was the mindset I was using on it. And we can expand that, absolutely.
Thank you so much. I'm going to take the last round now. I just wanted to say, Prof. Gerda, that I think that many universities can learn from you on how you support your public management students for exposure. I've worked with them at DPSA. I think there was a time we had about 5 of them that were sponsored by PSETA. And sometimes I always say I'd rather work with graduates than some of the public servants I've been exposed to in my life, because they are keen to learn, they are keen to run, they are innovative, but if you're not careful, they get suppressed in the system. So I think a model can come out of that work that has happened, your partnership with PSETA. And then, Prof, on the bursaries, we have a budget, public service, I think it's about 4 billion rands that contributes to skilling public servants annually. It's like 1% of the wage bill or something, but somewhere around there. And when I was in the department, we used to track the spending annually. Annually, department spends about 2 billion. The other 2 billion is not touched. So if you had to think of a massive program of taking in young people in the public service. So I want to agree with what you're saying, Prof, that the money is there. If you think of a massive program of bringing young people in the public service, from a training point of view, from a coaching and mentorship point of view, the resourcing required, the resources are there in the system. Even before you go to the sitters, the resources are there in the departments, because you have 2 billion that doesn't get used annually for training of public servants, which means the 4 billion is too much. Because again, we also have lots of public servants that use those resources, which is why people just do it for compliance at times. And you have some of these fly-by-night institutions that benefit a lot in terms of training public servants, but where's the impact? I don't know. So moving on to this side, but there's a gentleman here. Guys, no. I'm not taking your hands here. There is this gentleman and there was that lady there. I'm sorry, sir. Sorry, guys. I'm going to move that side. I'll see if my boss permits me to come back to you. Yes, I noted you. Number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6. Ivo, there's 2 hands this side. Can I just take them? Number 6, number 7, Number 8. Number 9, I'm closing. It's 9 points. Guys, please be straight to the point. You see, my panel is not happy. Questions, no comments, that's the instruction. But I know you're creative, you know how to make a comment, a question. So over to you. All kinds of things. Over to you in that order, number 1.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wiseman Dube, and I'm aspiring PhD student at the University of Pretoria. Wow. So my question is to Prof. Ivor first. Considering the journey of the Pendleton Act in the US and also the North Court Trevelyan in Britain in 1880s, after the acts were established at some point, there were other barriers that they experienced after that. So my question would be, now that we have the Public Service Amendment Act, what are some of the potential barriers that perhaps you experienced when you were passing through the act, or maybe some of the anticipated barriers as well that you might experience in the future? Then also the other second question to Prof. Fikeni, I want to ask that based on the overall political development trajectory of South Africa, where in your presentation you alluded that at some point we were characterized by patronage, corruption and all that, of which in terms of political development theory, those are some of the early characteristics of an early emerging state, for instance. So would you say that perhaps we haven't really reached a point in South Africa where we are now a fully qualified modern state, or where exactly can you place us at this current moment? Thank you.
I allowed you 2 questions because you are an emerging PhD student. There was a hand there at the back, yes.
Thank you, Yoli, for being so kind. Thank you. I actually appreciate being in this forum. Very spot on and key to the issues that we're struggling with as a country. I'm Thobela Nkukwana, a senior lecturer in the Department of Animal Sciences. As an animal scientist, I'm actually standing up to say I agree with everything that you said. I agree that since 1994 and to where we are today, the graphs that you were showing, 2023, population is increased, hospitals are overpopulated, nurses are sitting at home, doctors are sitting at home, and they are not being, so we do not have that anticipatory governance that you were all talking about. And what I need to hit to is that in my field of agriculture, I see disaster on the ground. So my question is, acknowledging that everybody who graduates with a degree, enters public service, becomes a public servant. Does the government have a training program that intervenes to say, we acknowledge that you have a degree, but because you're going to be part of this sector, this is a training that we think you deserve. Is that there? And also, one thing we need to acknowledge is that Africa is a poverty museum. That is a fact. We are hungry in Africa. Poverty does not go away. And people occupy positions. Once they feed their tummies, they think the food is too little to share. So even those who are in higher positions, highly paid, when they think of training others who will come and fill into those positions as they retire, they do not want to do it because it's going to take from their pockets. So I think for me, what we need to say is that, do we have what you all have been talking about, the transparency and the mindset to transition and see to the sustainable development of this country? That is my question. Thank you.
Thank you. This side, I promise to come back. This is the first hand here.
Thank you. I'm not sure whether to state or what, otherwise I'll be a block.
Okay, feel free.
Thank you. My name is Joe Mavuso. I happen to be an independent contractor for the National School of Government on induction for the public servants. So normally when I do the ice breaking in among the groups from level 1 up to 12, just ask a simple question, why are you here? Many of them, they are not sure, they don't know. Maybe the invitation was not clear, I'm not sure. But two things are very important for them. One is to get out of the probational period, and so that their pay progression can move. That's their interest. Very few of them will talk about their career in the public service. So, and for me, it's a red flag. That says those that are coming into the public service, those ages of the young people, maybe they are not public service work ready or interested. They've got no passion. All they are here for is a job. Get a salary. Break that poverty cycle in the family. Therefore, you will never have a service delivery that is we desire, that is flourishing, because the human resource, through the failure of interviews or recruitment, is not geared towards what Prof said here about talent. Because Prof said not everybody is a talent, but I disagree. Everybody is a talent. It's just that people apply, especially the public service. 10% of critical skills. I still believe there's talent in everybody. It's just that we need to identify it as they apply for a job, so that we harness that talent, we expose that talent, we train that talent, we give it more education so that it becomes relevant, and we select people in the public service that have got passion in developing this country. People at the back of their mind, they've got this nationalism, not for self-enrichment or self-development, but for the whole nation. So we lack that very much. So even if Prof. Somadoda Fikeni, we could have these scenarios of the future. For instance, whatever that we have learned now at the Matlaga Commission, but
Marlon, how do we identify these people who are actually corrupt, and how do we neutralize them or remove them from the picture? Because we are heavily infiltrated by organized crime. We've got syndicates moving in Cape Town. The violence down there, in my opinion, is cartels moving into the ganglands. So they will fight back, and we need, even within our military, to deal with that threat in order to support this transition. Sorry, this comes from my basis, but to touch on what the lady said there. If we are to succeed, we have to be able to push this process and this concept up into other African countries. We cannot sustain that. So we have to develop other African countries to the extent that... Thank you.
Next one. In that order.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kuku Ndlela. I'm a development practitioner, but currently I'm a full-time student in the University of Pretoria. I've been listening to the panel and the speakers. What I've realized is that in our quest to make the public service professional, we also need to look at the issue of the fragmented public institutions. The way they are, every time when there is a change in administration, there is either a merger, or sometimes they divide certain departments into completely different departments, where the professional people are like getting discouraged and leave the public service. Also, they become redundant. As a result, you'll never see the impact on the ground. when you go to the ground, because I'm doing the research, maybe the state.
The experience of assistant director, deputy director, of which they can't because they are on a level 5 position. So as an acting office manager, I've fought this. I've tried to make them act so that they acquire that 3 years. At least then they can be able to transition into the next SMS or whenever they go into an interview. So my worry is the impact that management change has an impact on service delivery, because if I'm on level 5 and I have this vision of having a service delivery impact, if I get there, I'll be able to have these dreams, these visions, and so that I assist the citizens in service delivery. So that is where the problem is. I think if we amend those policies so that they assist us, because those things also kill the morals of those people that are educated and sitting there in 20 years on level 5, and you can't do anything because someone is saying, no, you cannot get this position because you're on a level 5. Thank you.
On the other side, remember, I'm doing a favor for you, so don't take too much time.
Yes. Thank you so much, Sisioli and the panel. So my name is Lesego Mahlangu. I am a political appointment in the city of Tshwane. So you can understand today I feel attacked, but it's fine. I just want to ask the level of engagement, stakeholder engagement in the very rich research that has been provided today. The profs, they spoke about all of these issues, and I think we have all identified the problem being, the political infiltration, the political, just destabilizing of the matter. And I'm just wondering how much of the research has invested in stakeholder engagement. Are you talking to these politicians and political parties? I can tell you right now that as I'm sitting here as a young professional appointed by a political party, trying to engage, literature at the same time, during this political election, I'm expected to be punching in digits because of some payback that I must be doing for a political party, of which I don't mind reinvesting in the political party. But do not underestimate just how much of the responsibility and the power which politicians have. They don't know what to do with it. They really believe that they put us in municipalities or wherever they put us to be their bodyguards. They really do not understand what is it that we are supposed to be doing in these institutions, because you can imagine it goes back to the institutional memory that we are supposed to then now be transferring into the political parties. They don't understand our work to be that. And I think maybe perhaps the universities are like, we're not engaging them, are like in stakeholder understanding that you hold so much power and you have so much of a big role to play in this cultural redirection that we're looking for. This goes for the trade unions also as well. It goes also as well to what Prof was saying, that our families play a role in what we are doing. So our research, comrades, we must, I'm so sorry. Our research, we must try and trickle it down to the most layers man on the ground, because it's us in our communities who must be holding our own fathers and mothers accountable in public service. Why are you staying there for long? If you are so tired, why are you still there? When they knock off 1 o'clock, they're already home. We must be asking them, why are you home at this time? So I think the research, it must invest as much as it can in stakeholder engagement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, comrade. Please hand over here. Kanti, how many people? Hey, man. Oh, yes, I noted that one. We'll finish with you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you again for very interesting and informative presentations. I'm Henny Labuskafne. I'm from a consulting firm, QBX Consulting, mainly addressing municipalities. I just want to refer to the comments. I think Professor van Zyl referred to that, and Professor Ngenni also. Municipalities are really the core of service delivery. And if you look at the tendencies that we've got in public administration, so I want to pose the question, do we really still align, with reference to Professor Hoek's talent management introduction, do we align capacity in the state and in municipalities to the actual needs of the services that I will argue that to some extent we've developed in a bloating structure. that public service became an employment agency. Employment agency for where the job creation needs are, instead of really determining where we are supposed to capacitate the state and municipalities. If you look at municipalities, how they budget by inflation adjustments year on year. I doubt whether any municipality can actually state what their capacity needs are at this point in time. They build on what was there and continue that trend forever. So if you really need to start looking at talent management, etc., you don't actually know where your capacity deficits are. Specifically issues of health, engineering, Johannesburg public entities, power, waste management, etc. If you look at what capacity requirements there are, it's artisans, it's engineers. If you look at subsidized education in municipalities, we don't determine who studies what. The employee determines what he intends to study, and most of them now want to become PhD candidates, etc. But their study field's not aligned to what the council needs, but we provide that assistance. So how do we overcome that? Is there still a need to really go and determine what the actual capacity requirements are? And if so, how do we do that in public institutions? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. There was a last one there. And I see people are leaving. I promise you they won't take long to respond, and then we'll close and go. If you can just hold on for a while. Over to you.
I'm feeling a bit, I don't know what, the way it seems like DG wants to, not DG, the program director wants really to control me. No, I just quickly want to check one thing, Prof. Professionalization, the implementation of that framework, the implementation of what the 30 reforms, what the Prof. Chipkin terms the 30 reforms. What do you think that we need urgently from a culture perspective, entrenched in, whether it's in departments, nationally, provincial, or at a local government level? Because one of the things for institutions or departments not really to meet their targeted outcomes that they have set in their strategic planning, there's sometimes an issue of culture, amongst others. It's not the only issue. It will also not be fair for one to sit here and not say something on the issue of leadership. I've heard most of you spoke about the issue of leadership. And quite frankly, here and there, I think I do disagree with the notion, or some of them that has been said, that there's no leadership. That's just a blank statement to say there's no leadership.
Poor leadership.
In the context of, for an example, AG outcomes and other authoritative bodies within the country, will it really be fair to make such a blank approach that there's no leadership in terms of what was said earlier on? And strange enough, let me not get there, let me leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Now we bring it back to the panel in that order.
All right. So,
is it on?
Yeah. I think the biggest...
You are misled by this slide.
I see. Right, good. There we are. No longer misled. So I think the biggest challenge, one of the major challenges to the implementation is going to be a temptation to deal with the current politicization with repoliticization. New parties are going to say, and we're seeing it already. There was opposition to the bill from the IFP, from the DA as well, and especially in the Western Cape, saying they want to be able to deploy their own people because they don't trust ANC deployees. I think that's a very dangerous logic, because what it is, we're in this endless cycle of politicizing and then repoliticizing and repoliticizing to deal with the past politicization. We need a break. And I think that's what the passing of the bill does. It potentially interrupts this process of politicization. So how to implement it? Well, that's going to be the big challenge. But I think that the bill already is partly its implementation. It takes those powers immediately away from the politicians. They simply don't have those powers anymore. So we have to invent new paths of recruitment. We're busy about to, I think we'll do it in the next 2 weeks, about to release a white paper, which I'm quite excited about. I think it's a good paper, on the appointment of Director Generals. We're doing work on the pedagogy of training public servants. We will release in the next couple of weeks a policy framework for holding public servants accountable. We don't want them to become unaccountable now that they've got a whole lot of original powers for administration. We're both in a very exciting space, but agree there's lots of room for things to go very, very wrong as well. But I think we can manage it. There were other questions. I'll address them in an op-ed, I think, which will come out of this.
Thank you very much. I just want us to recognize that my observation, when you go to some departments, not everybody is not talented. We have a leadership crisis which can take a genius into an ordinary, confused and withdrawn person. So there are leaders. In fact, they are not leaders. They are people occupying positions of authority who have no leadership, no imagination, no ability to create a new culture. I've chaired 14 entities, some multi-billion. I've seen what happens when you come in and provide simple, direct leadership, no fear, no favor, nothing, and how you start seeing some people who had given up starting to show up. So here you have 1.3 million public servants, maybe more if you add municipalities and other entities. If you were to concentrate on appointing right people the right way, and political figures do give the right strategic leadership direction, and there is sufficient, as Ivor has said, insulation between administration and politics, you'll begin to see talent and capacity. I met with the ambassador of UAE and others. They said about 170,000 South Africans are there. Why? They are running away from the environment that is toxic. It doesn't give them space. But they are some of the most talented individuals. But when you go home, even if I wanted to be a ward councillor in my village, I think I would lose because I don't have the skill to mobilize, but I have the skill to lead. The problem that we've had in this country, we've confused people who have the skill to mobilize, who rise into the apex. Once they are there, they don't know what to do. But they are able to create imagined and hallucinated branches and other things and so on very quickly. They are able to say the meeting is in the town hall when the meeting is in church so that they outperform their opponents and so on. Then they rise. They are always in every list. When they get to the top, they say, my wishes now have come. If they are appointed for 5 years, they take those 5 years trying to recover from the shock of being appointed. So that in itself, but I want to close by saying, let's take this process as a war. People who are corrupt, as you have seen in the Madlanga Commission, plan precisely. Their workshops have clear implementation targets. Their performance measurement is clearer. People who want to correct these mistakes, they dream vaguely. They commit tentatively. And they think they are going to win. It's not that criminals are more than the population. They are just more organized. Thank you.
At the risk of sounding like the academic I am, in organizational theory we say structure follows strategy. Now, if the strategy is the new bill, the new act, sorry, don't use the same structure to try and implement it.
Thanks for that. Last word, talent management. Normally 10 to 20% of your staff are in critical positions, and that's where you've got to be developing. And folks, in this public service, that's 120 to 200,000 people. If you can get 200,000 people and treat them like absolutely special employees, you're doing something.
Wow. Thank you so much. I wanted to say, Ivo, my anxiety with this bill, with the implementation of this amendment, of these amendments, I think it will also apply to the PSC amendment once it has gone through the final stages, once it's approved by the president, is the resistance or passive sabotage by political actors who are in the system and who perceive the bill or the amendments as a mechanism to take influence and power from them, and some of them being in strategic positions in terms of driving implementation. And secondly, linked to that, my anxiety is the officials who are supposed to drive the processes, who will not move because they have to please the politicians, who may not be interested in ensuring implementation of the bill, because it means we will be stuck. And when that happens, I don't know if we have leadership in the country that can stand up and say, this has been approved and therefore it must be implemented. What are you doing about it? So that's, having been in the system and having seen how the system works, that's the anxiety that I have, which is why for me it's important to really take the conversation even outside government and to hold government accountable in the conversation itself, to be able to put pressure to ensure implementation. So that's my own personal anxiety. But thank you very much. I have been tasked now to be chairman, because the chairman guy who was here is gone. You know Mahua in time. My sisters and brothers will understand me, but Ivo and others don't have to understand me. We're talking about things. You know, these people plan, eh? Now he had planned that at a certain time he must leave to go to catch a flight somewhere. So he has apologized. That's Chris, who was supposed to do the closing remarks. So he asked me to just do something briefly for him. He comes from Conrad Adenier Stiftung. And I never able to pronounce the thing. Stiftung. And he says they are a German political foundation, and they've been partners in the delivery of this work today. They work quite closely with the New South Institute, and he did say that in thanking all the panelists who have participated, he apologizes he can't be here. It's because he has very tight time frames, and that he appreciates your availability to participate in this dialogue and shaping the future in terms of South Africa. He also appreciates the relationship with NSI. Apparently, you've been working very well with him, Ivo. Keep it up, and that everybody who's here, thank you very much. And I've been told by Delani, the NSI team that has been behind this successful event here. I don't know, he always hides. He's sitting somewhere in a corner hiding, of course. He indicated to me that the presentations, they are going to publicize them, or they are going to publish them on the NSI website. And I think the link, this recording, they are going to publish it on the NSI. We always do that. If you want to go back and listen to some of the presentations, you'll have an opportunity to do so and download the presentations. I think there's really good statistics and information in those presentations that you can refer to and sound current and contemporary as a student, and clever and intelligent, and just throw in something that happened last week, throw in your assignment and quote it properly. Don't plagiarize. Reference it properly, don't plagiarize. Thank you very much. We're done. There's food there outside. Please Don't create fruitless expenditure for our partners. Eat the food if you can finish it. Thank you very much, and apologies, we ran a little bit of time. Thank you. You want the photo shoot? Are you for done? Oh.